So thank you everyone for joining this session today. I'm really excited to share with you our experiences and some stories in building out Goldcorp's new intranet, which we actually launched just a few months ago, so still hot off the press. My name's Melanie. I'm from Habanero Consulting. I've been working here for almost 4 years, and I've spent most of that time working on the Goldcorp account. For many years, we had a close working relationship where we did a lot of sustainment type work with Goldcorp. So when this project came to fruition about 1.5 years ago, I took the lead from a business analyst perspective, and that's why I'm here today talking to you about Goldcorp. So a little bit about what we're going to go through in the next 45 minutes to an hour is a bit of an introduction, some background and context about Goldcorp and Conveyor, which is the name of their portal. Then we're going to dive into some solution highlights. We're going to look at about 4 main solution highlights of the intranet, and then we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. So a little bit about Habanero for those of you that might not know. We're based in Vancouver with offices in Calgary and Toronto as well. And what we're really about is wanting to help people and organizations thrive. And we believe that a thriving workplace is really one where people are highly engaged and connected to the company and to each other. And it's a place where people are building not only great careers, but the company is also getting the most out of their people. And where we come into play with that is we really believe technology has an important role to play in building those thriving workplaces. And that's the area that we like to work in. And now diving into a little bit of context about Goldcorp. So Goldcorp is one of the largest gold mining companies in the world. Many of you might have heard of them or be quite familiar with Goldcorp. They are headquartered in Vancouver with their corporate offices in Vancouver, but they have operations throughout North America, South America, and Latin America. So they operate in 3 languages. They've got about 20,000 employees and currently about 13 to 15 active mines, projects, operations throughout all of those areas. And now a little bit about Conveyor. So Conveyor is the name of the portal that Goldcorp has. And the first iteration of this portal was built in 2007. The core focus at the time was really around supporting collaboration and local site communication. So really the communications at the local mine sites. And it was really effective at supporting the business in doing these things. When we were looking at migrating the content, there were about 2,500 collaboration team sites, most of which were actively still being used, and about a dozen of mini business application workflows. Goldcorp started using Nintex about 3 years ago, and they've really derived a lot of value out of that in their portal. A key design decision was made early on to establish a distributed, decentralized model for the portal. What ended up happening was one portal was created for each of the mines. So we ended up with 13 portals. They were all designed the same, and the IA was the same initially, but the management of them was distributed. So near the end, or sort of after quite a few years, there was no longer much consistency between them because each of the portals had really grown and evolved based on the mine site it was at and the business needs and support it was getting from those locations. So for years, this model really served Goldcorp well. But we started to notice some signs in early 2014 that Goldcorp was really starting to outgrow Conveyor. There were some interesting strategy changes and business growth happening at Goldcorp at the time, and we started to realize the portal was no longer able to really support that. So we began to rethink that decentralized model. It had become clear to us that the overarching IA was too complicated, and the separation was starting to create and reinforce cultural silos that were not something that Goldcorp wanted to continue operating within. So fast forward a little bit, this project, the redesign and upgrade project, started about 1.5 years ago. And I won't go into the detailed business case for the redesign, but I did want to share what some of the main drivers were. So first of all, Goldcorp really wanted us to improve the overall user experience, generally around findability and supporting collaboration. Tasks had become sort of difficult to execute on the portal, and we wanted to take a really good look at that. Improving communications was a big one, mostly around looking at the consistency of messaging. Those separated portals had created challenges around getting global messaging out to the whole company in a timely and consistent manner. So we wanted to look at avenues to do that. And we also were asked to look at, how do we make the content more engaging? Goldcorp has a lot of depth in their photography and media assets, and we wanted to build something where that could really be showcased for them. Related to that, Goldcorp wanted a better way to increase the reach of the portal and connect with the entire organization and not be limited to really reaching only the office workers or people who are logging into a computer every day. And finally, our discovery and research highlighted that the organization, really saw the portal as a gateway, not just to the information and collaboration capabilities, but also to all the digital touchpoints in the workplace. They wanted us to rethink the role of an intranet in the new world of productivity with Office 365 and the digital tools available to those employees. Okay, so that's enough about context. Let's get into some of the highlights of the new intranet. So we're going to go through sort of 4 main areas. In every redesign or upgrade project, one of the initial questions everybody faces is, what do we do about the IA? With Goldcorp, we had a unique challenge, and the question we had to ask ourselves was, how do you effectively merge 13 different intranets together without going through an entire IA process from scratch? Given this was an upgrade and redesign project, we didn't have the liberty of designing from scratch and going from zero. We had a starting point that we needed to work with. So we looked at the various portals and evaluated what had ended up on the global navigations for each one of those portals. We took a bit of a deep dive into the content on each of those portals. And along with our knowledge and experiences of the most common use cases in working and supporting Goldcorp for years, we were able to come up with a new categorization model, and we were also a little bit prescriptive about it. We were able to sort of take those knowledge pieces together and pretty much come up with this categorization. So we recognized first off that the common content areas across all the Mind portals were news, safety, team sites, and policies and procedures. So our first decision here was to really simplify the global navigation with these high-level sort of general topics, and we essentially pushed down the localization of the content into these different areas. So we wanted to really focus on having a global navigation that was going to be robust for all of the different users in all of the different locations, and we were going to deal with the uniqueness and localization of that content within each of these areas. Which brings us to our next big IA challenge, localization, global content versus local content. Like I said, we decided to really weave this into the different content areas to create more of a seamless experience for users, instead of that being sort of a clunky top global nav experience. The first example of this is on our new site directory. So here's our screenshot of the new site directory. Previously, the list of collaboration sites lived on each one of the different Mind sites for those Mind sites. So in putting all of those portals together, we had to find a way to allow users to navigate the list of collaboration sites without introducing too much noise in that experience. As much as we were consolidating all of the portals, the reality still remained that a user really, 90% of the time is looking for content about their Mind site and their work. So in merging all of the team sites together, we created this site directory for that. So our site directory, as you see here, is location targeted. Under the selected filters, you'll see that it says location PGM. Now PGM is a name of one of the mines in Ontario, and these screenshots and all the ones following in this presentation assume that I am a worker at PGM. So when I first land on this area, I see the list of collaboration team sites that are tagged with PGM. Now it's easy for me to switch locations and browse the collaboration sites for other mines. Previously in the past, that was a bit of a difficult task given you had to leave your portal and go to another portal. So we've really aimed to simplify the targeted experience here by just showing the list of collaboration sites for your location. A similar concept here for documents as well. This is our policies and procedures section. And what was neat about this in terms of sort of a fun design challenge for us is that we had 3 main content types to work with: local procedures, local policies, and global policies. Now, as someone who works at a mine, or at least that being my profile on Conveyor, when I click on policies and procedures, I get defaulted to the local procedures for PGM. Now, if I were a corporate employee, we decided to target them to global policies because procedures around crusher lockout is not really pertinent to someone who works in finance in Vancouver. So we were able to just do a little bit of light targeting that way as well. Something else to note here was the ability to have globally relevant content right next to very local specific content. In the past, sharing global policies throughout the organization without duplicating that content was definitely a challenge. And with this mix of targeting and global content here, we're able to have global policies just one click away from PGM's local procedures. And this is our news page. So the news page is where the local versus global challenge was especially strong. The mine sites were used to having their own homepage that they controlled for their local communication needs for years. This is the way they had always operated. And now the new reality called for them to share one news page with the whole company. So there was a lot of challenges with that. There was a big need to become more globally consistent in messaging, but the need to have a place where the mine sites had autonomy to manage their own community news, local events, little celebrations for the mine sites, that was also still very real. So that was an interesting challenge for us. And just something to note, due to confidentiality agreements, we can't show any Goldcorp imagery or Goldcorp graphs, but they do have very strong assets in this area, and this news page really came to life with all that. So the top here, we've got the feature panel, which is where we have some of the news articles up top. And this is an area to share, high priority, globally relevant news articles for the whole company. It can also show campaign type information. It's not limited to just show news articles. And just below in the page here, we've got an area for local news. Again, this is detecting the local news for PGM for me. And these news articles and this whole panel is an area that the local mine sites can control and manage themselves. They author this, they manage the approval workflow for posting, they've got likes and commenting that they've got for their mine sites. And what's neat here is, it's a little bit down the page, but what we've done is we've built in the ability to collapse certain areas. So if someone at PGM wanted to collapse this Goldcorp at a glance area so that they could see their local news a little higher up on the page, they absolutely could do that. Again, it's also simple for folks to go in and look at news from the other locations. We have directory pages that show more news articles. And the location targeting is, again, just managed by a simple tag. So you can more easily browse other local news articles from across Goldcorp than previously. It was pretty tricky. So some key insights here. Don't be afraid to drastically rethink the information architecture, and sometimes being prescriptive can be the right approach. If that is an avenue that you choose to go down, baking in usability testing early on can really pay off. We were able to put together a prototype really early in our design phase once we had the IA, or at least a working draft of the IA done. And that prototype really allowed us to validate our assumptions and to also tweak and make adjustments for sure. And localization doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's really neat now what we can do with embedding targeting and localization in different parts of the pages throughout the systems. All right, moving on to our second highlight, designing for the new digital workplace. We wanted to help Goldcorp make sense of the new emerging digital landscape. Much like other organizations, Goldcorp recently purchased and rolled out Office 365 for Exchange and expects over time to move more of their productivity story into the cloud. Adopting an old school set of practices for what intranets should look like just didn't make sense at this point. We wanted to question some of the norms for areas like the home page, overall navigation, and the mix of pages for publishing and collaboration. In our interviews, we also picked up a strong desire to try and use Conveyor as a gateway into all the applications and information at Goldcorp. There really was an overwhelming theme of people wanting Conveyor to be their portal into the ecosystems of apps. We heard things in our research like, Conveyor is the steering wheel of Goldcorp. It's our newspaper. Everything needs to be from Conveyor. And like any other big enterprise, there really are tons of systems and applications that employees need to use on a daily basis, above and beyond the portal. So we decided to take an approach that I like to call integration by illusion. And we set out to build a dashboard into the information, collaboration, and applications that Goldcorp uses every day. And that can be found on a page called My Goldcorp. So we took a different approach to the traditional My Site and called it My Goldcorp. Some people call it a My Site on speed, which I kind of like. And I'm just going to walk you through the different sections here. So the top yellow bar is called the alert bar. We've got my notifications, my email, my calendar invites, my tasks, and my newsfeed. We've got some light O365 integration here with email and calendar. And we also have some integration with Nintex for my notifications and my tasks. So this area is meant to be a way for employees to manage all of the alerts notifications they may be getting throughout the day. The next section is the I'm following panel. So this is really piggybacking on the SharePoint 2013 following features and making that a little bit more robust. We've got 4 sections here. The first is departments and teams, which is where users can essentially bookmark their collaboration sites to their My Goldcorp and really just highlight the 5, 10, or 12 that they need to use on a regular basis. Same concept for documents, applications, and workflows. So we've also got a directory of applications and workflows available to users, and they can pick which ones they want to pin to their My Goldcorp here. And similar concept for forms and templates. Next up is common actions. And when I talked about integration by illusions, this is what I was meaning here. We've created this section to be really task-based for users. Some of the actions here, we've got book a leave request, manage your goals, view the reports library, get IT help. All of these actions are things that users need to log into other systems to execute. And our goal here was to really simplify that experience. Instead of being presented with a list of systems, we wanted to really make it task-based to allow users to just get to what they need to get to right away without needing to remember that, well, where do I log incidences? Is that Concur, or is that where I log expenses? So the goal here was to really make that simple for users. There is single sign-on for most of these systems, but there's no heavy integration. There's no iframes. Nothing actually opens up in SharePoint. So it's just a little bit of integration there. The objective was to create a foundation here for that unified digital experience. So a few key insights here. Always aware of the broader landscape of tools. This is becoming more and more of a no-brainer as the digital workplace becomes something that is very well socialized. Consider light integration to make the overall app experience harmonize. There might be some low-hanging fruit that you can take advantage of that doesn't have to be the full integration model. And help users however you can to understand what tool they need to use when and for what and where they need to go for things. All right, on to our third highlight. It's all about engaging workers from anywhere. This redesign project was an opportunity for us to consider extending the intranet to mobile devices. And we started to explore what was involved in doing that at Goldcorp. While this was an exciting shift for everyone, and technically quite possible with design techniques and technology, we started to realize that there was a lot of unknowns to tackle here. Mostly around unknown requirements and scope for the field workers, and that not being super easy to sort out in a short amount of time. New licensing and cost implications with that. User management, change management, device management. There was tons of things here, and it became clear that this might be the iceberg that could sink the project if we didn't handle it properly. So we decided to start with the foundation and really let it grow over time as Goldcorp's mobile strategy really matured. And what we did in this project is we focused on the easier pieces for us, which is design and technology. And what we did is we built in responsive design throughout Conveyor. And I've got a few videos here that's going to show you that interaction. So this is the news page, and our responsive design was optimized for the news experience in consuming this type of information. And you're going to see here how this page collapses at different breakpoints. So we've got a bit of an iPad view here, and you can see our global navigation is in the hamburger menu. And here we have the phone view, and everything just stacks up kind of nicely. This was a really big win for Goldcorp. Consuming the portal and consuming Conveyor information was, close to impossible previously on any sort of mobile device. So this was really neat to see them adopt for sure. Next up, we've got the My Goldcorp area. So same idea here with the responsive stacking that's going to happen. The increased, accessibility of these collaboration and productivity tools has been really well received. And it's quite neat that these systems and collaboration team sites are just sort of a couple clicks away, even on tablets and phones now. This is the site directory here. Check out a bit of the interaction before it collapses. Something to note here is we have that refiner panel on the left where it says filter by. And we were able to make that refiner panel still available there, as well as the global navigation menu. Here we've got the phone view. We still have our metadata about our sites available for us. And we've got a similar concept here for documents in the policies and procedures area. So there we have our document preview for the documents. Our refiner panel on this area is quite important to the navigation of these documents. So that was quite critical to keep that available. Here we go. Document preview still available in this view. It's going to go away here. But we still have all the metadata right at our fingertips. So a few key insights here. Really ask the question if going mobile is a part of the strategy for the portal. And remember that design and technology really are the easy parts. Licensing, user management, change management, device management, all those things require big efforts. Definitely not impossible, but there is coordination and planning that needs to be involved in that. And no matter what approach you take, starting with the foundation and growing it out over time can be something quite valuable. All right, our fourth solution highlight, fixing permissions. So SharePoint has a dirty little secret. Permissions are hard, and they can get quite messy and tricky to manage sometimes. And Goldcorp was not immune to this. Goldcorp had taken a distributed approach to permission management, and they had allowed the business to manage their own security on SharePoint. And this worked well for quite a while. But as Goldcorp and Conveyor and the content on Conveyor grew, they started running into some challenges with this model, and it was clear that Goldcorp was ready for a higher order of compliance and permission management. Some of the challenges Goldcorp was facing with the distributed model was, first of all, there was a lack of clarity about roles and accountabilities. Who needed to approve which things and who actually needed to learn permissions and make the changes in the system. Reporting was also not strong enough anymore. It had become hard for the business to know and feel confident about who had access to what on a sort of easy day-to-day basis. Training also had a hard time keeping up to all the people that needed to understand SharePoint permissions. And as many of you know, permissions aren't really a simple thing to teach or to learn and understand. Over time, there was sort of inconsistencies in the processes and actual technical configurations of assigning permissions. And over time, people started to lose trust in the system, which led to a desire to over-secure things or to maybe avoid putting content on the portal altogether. The first thing we had to do in our pursuit to make security a better experience for everyone was to establish roles and get really clear about where the accountabilities were. And what we really wanted to do was separate the roles and accountability of the business and of IT. So what we did is we established the role of site owners And these are people in the business who are ultimately accountable for the content on Conveyor and responsible for who had access to that content. Typically, this was a manager or above, and often was the head of a department that accountability for content for their group ultimately fell onto. And then the accountability of actually executing the technical permission changes and getting under the hood of SharePoint security was put onto IT. They no longer had to chase down the business for approvals, however. They really got to focus on just executing the tasks once those requests came to the IT department. And the business really had to manage getting the right approvals and making certain decisions and owning those decisions about who could look at whose content. And from there, we set out to create experiences throughout Conveyor that simplified security and would start to really rebuild the trust in the user community that Conveyor was really an area where your content was good to go. The first example of this is in our site directory. As many of you know, if you don't have access to something in SharePoint, you won't even know that it exists. This became a bit of a pain point for Goldcorp because over the years of having and using their portal, a lot of content had been generated, and oftentimes that content had been overly secured. So there was a lot of things on Conveyor that existed that many people couldn't see. So the approach was taken in the site directory to display the names of all of the team sites, regardless of whether or not you had access to them. You can see on the screenshot here that there is a team site with the little lock icon next to it called Budgets and SVP. Now this is a team site that my account doesn't have access to, but I can still see that that site exists. And I can self-select access to it. So if I were to click on the site or to click on the lock icon, I would be presented this access form, which would be pre-filled out for me. All I need to fill out is what level of access I want to it. Do I want to view it? Do I want to make edits to it? Or do I want to become the owner of it? And submit that request. And that request would get forwarded to the site owner. They would simply approve or reject my request. And then the approved request would go to IT, and IT would execute the request. We also created a brand new permission reporting tool, and this provided the site owners with the information they needed to make the decisions that their new roles required them to do. Now, this was really important because we were putting accountabilities onto the site owners without giving them the right information to make those decisions. So building this piece out was critical in the success of this new model. And it was really key for us to remember that these site owners are not people that have a deep understanding of SharePoint, nor will they have time to learn SharePoint permissions. We needed to build this in a way that was very intuitive and allowed them to get enough information about security on their site and on their content without giving them the long spiel about SharePoint permissions and levels and groupings and hierarchy, etc., etc. So I just want to point out one of the main features here that we did is we linked all of the permission levels into just 3 different types of levels. Not to get too much into the details here, but many of you might know SharePoint has quite a few permission levels, which can be hard to understand quickly what those are. You know, what's the difference between the designer level or the contribute level or the edit level or the custom contribute level someone created 3 years ago? Can be tricky to keep track of. So we did all the work in the background to map those levels to 3 headings. So we've got those 3 headings highlighted here: site owners, content editors, content viewers. We've got editors and viewers expanded just to show as well we were able to surface AD groups within these levels. And we were able to also expand the AD groups in this report to show the names. Oftentimes, the strategy for some companies is to use AD groups in SharePoint security, but those AD groups might not be telling enough of who's actually in them. We went one step further and expanded the AD groups to show the names right within this report in SharePoint for the site owners. This is just the rest of the report. And at the bottom here as well, we also built this to accommodate unique permission structures as well. So similar interaction for those. We wanted to take this one step further and ensure that Conveyor was not going to outgrow this model anytime soon. So we built a site request and creation process using Nintex forms and workflows. And this process requires the business to take ownership of their content right from the get-go by defining ownership and permissions right at the site request level. So before anything is built or any content is in, we need those structures laid out first before those sites are provisioned. What we also introduced which was new for Goldcorp, was an approval gate for new sites. Up to this point, anybody who had the full control level was able to go ahead and provision their own sites at will. What we wanted to do now to ensure mature growth of the portal and not proliferation of sites for no reason was introduce an approval gate by the portal manager to ensure that there was always enough of a business requirement for new team sites before going ahead and creating them. So this is that request form, and the main thing I want to show you is actually just on the second half of it. So I'm going to jet there. And we can see here we've got security and permissions right from the get-go, and once this form is submitted, it's going to go to the portal manager for review, and then it's going to get likely approved and the sites will be provisioned. And those site owners, right from day one, will need to put in the request for who needs access to those and get going on that. So some key insights here. The reality is SharePoint permissions aren't easy to understand. So look at ways that you can introduce little moments of simplicity within that experience for users. Being 100% open and flexible can lead to chaos, especially if rapid growth of content is coming. Speaking the user's language. This was really interesting challenge for us around trying to give users just enough information, but not too much information, and not speak too much technical SharePoint jargon to them. And maybe most importantly, finding the right balance for your culture and sensitivity of content around how restricted versus open you want to be is very foundational. So the 4 solution highlights we went through today, we talked about information architecture, designing for the digital workplace, engaging the work field and expanding the reach, and fixing permissions and planning for growth. So I hope you pulled something useful out of these stories today. I know we sure learned a lot throughout the project and are pretty pumped with the results. So thanks again for joining, and have a good one.